Okay, we're live. We'll give everybody a few minutes to fold in. Welcome everyone to the first session of TMF Week 2022. Looks like we've got a few people coming in. If you want to let us know in the chat where you guys are dialing in from, so we can see where everyone's from. We've got Suzanne from New Freedom, Pennsylvania. Got some folks from India, North Carolina. We'll see people fold in. Okay, perfect. And we're going to get started in roughly 6 or 7 minutes. We want to give everyone a chance to join. For those of you that are joining us on the East Coast, this may be your first session of the day, so we'll give everyone a couple minutes to join. And again, keep sharing where you guys are coming in from. Got some people from hot Atlanta. I guess it's warm there this morning. All right, morning, Chris from Montreal. So we're expecting a big one today, Mary. I think we're in the thousands.
Good crowd.
Yeah, let's hope so. All right, we've got lots of folks coming in. We'll give everybody a few minutes to join. For those of you that are folding in right, we're going to get ready in about 5 minutes. I'll kick off today's session with some introductions, and we'll talk a little bit about the conference and what we have planned. And then I'll hand it over to Mary, who's going to be taking us through a really exciting presentation on evolving the TMF plan and automating quality reviews. The session's being recorded, so if anybody has to join late or drop out a little early, you can always go back and check out the recording. It's going to be available in the same place as all of the other live sessions around 24 hours after the session is finished. So check back here tomorrow and you'll see the recording of this session. For those of you that are joining now, if you have questions throughout today's presentation, we do have 15 minutes at the end of the session to start to be quizzing Mary on her presentation. We're going to be throwing some tough questions Mary's way. If you navigate to the right hand side, there's a little menu, and on that menu there's a live chat, and then to the right of it there is a little Q&A section. That's where you guys can ask your questions throughout today's presentation. I would encourage everyone to ask them as we progress through the slides, just so that your question is topical. But of course, if you want to throw them at the end, you can as well, and we will be hand selecting some questions. All right, so we've got a fair few folks folding in. We'll give it another 4 or 5 minutes to allow everybody to join. We're scheduled to start in around 2 minutes. We'll give everyone a chance to join. Good evening from Armenia. Okay, well, thank you guys for joining us on your evening. And I imagine it's pretty early for some of you guys also in India and the APAC region. So let us know where you guys are watching from today. And if you guys aren't already aware, if you go back to the main event dashboard, we actually have a contest that's running today, where we're going to be giving away some TMF Week swag and some t-shirts and other things. All you need to do to enter is to take a photo of your TMF Week 2022 setup, a little selfie of where you're watching from, and that will be your entry into the contest. Okay. North Carolina, we got a couple from North Carolina. That's cool. Lyon, France. Bonjour, bon matin.
Good food.
Good, oh yeah. Okay, perfect. All right, let's kick it off. We'll get everybody to join in a few minutes. I'm just going to start sharing my screen. If you guys can just let me know in the chat if you guys can see my screen, that would be great. I think you can see it, Mary, right? We're all good to go.
We can see it.
Perfect, great. Well, first of all, thank you everybody for joining us for another TMF week. This is our 3rd year running the virtual Trial Master File Conference, and we're incredibly proud and happy to obviously announce that, with this session and with this conference itself in its third year, really setting it as the largest convergence of TMF professionals on the planet. We've got over 1,500 of you registered for this week's event across the sessions from Monday through Friday. We've got sessions running pretty much most of the day from 9 a.m. Eastern all the way through to around 2 p.m. Eastern, a mix of presentations, panels, fireside discussions, and even a pub quiz to finish the week. Just to kick things off for today, please keep throwing in comments, questions as we go out through today's session. I'll just draw your attention. On the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see a short menu. On that menu, you'll see a live chat, and you'll see a Q&A section. The live chat, of course, is for you to let us know where you're dialing in from. And then the Q&A section is for you to ask questions to Mary throughout today's session. And we will have roughly around 15 minutes at the end of the session for us to answer questions. Today's session will be around 45 minutes, and we will be finishing at around 9:45 a.m. Eastern. Today, the first session of TMF Week is evolving the TMF plan and automating quality reviews. Just a little bit of housekeeping. So all of these sessions will be recorded. I know that every time that we run online sessions and webinars, this is the most frequent question we get asked. All of the sessions will be recorded and available at the end of the day. All attendees will also receive a certificate of attendance for the entire TMF week, not just for one session. So if you attend one session, if you attend 10 sessions, you will receive a certificate of attendance. This is an interactive session, so feel free to ask questions. Questions will be answered at the end. And every session this morning or this afternoon or this evening, wherever you're dialing in from, will be followed by a very brief networking break. If you navigate back to the event homepage, you will find an area called the Lounge. This is a virtual networking area. You can sit at a table and have a video conversation with a whole bunch of other TMF people and talk about the sessions, talk about the weather, talk about whatever you want to talk about in that virtual lounge. I will be there in about 45 minutes, so I hope to see you there soon. So today's speaker, I'm joined today by Mary Emanuel, Head of TMF and Registry Operations at Pfizer. She has been with Pfizer now for over 25 years and has held a variety of positions in information management and has extensive experience in document and records management. Prior to her current role, Mary led a variety of teams and programs focused on authoring and content management, quality systems and documentation, business process management, and IT support. Mary has an MS in Information and Library Science and a BA in Liberal Arts, both from University of Michigan. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen, Mary, and I will give you the opportunity to share yours, and we will get today's presentation on.
Okay, thank you, Oliver. So I will put in screen show mode. Hello, everyone. I'm really excited to be here and talking with all of you about evolving the TMF plan and automating quality reviews. Before I get started, I just wanted to shout out to the one Michigan person who I saw way up in the Keweenaw Peninsula. So that is impressive. I'm in Michigan as well, but down in the lower peninsula. So today we're going to review Pfizer's approach to streamlining the quality and content review process, both through process improvement and technology and advancements. So we'll go through several different areas. First, I did want to share with you our eTMF strategy, and then we'll talk about the TMF study owner transformation. At Pfizer, we call the TMF owner the TMF study owner, so consider those terms to be synonymous. Then we'll talk about automation of quality review and how we're achieving that at Pfizer. And after that, we'll open it up to questions and answers. So the Pfizer eTMF strategy was set several years ago. I think we began this probably in 2018. And this strategy was really developed because we had had our eTMF system at that point for 8 years, I believe, and it was time for us to improve the system, make updates. It's not to say that we hadn't been making updates to the eTMF system throughout its time, but we really needed something much more substantial. So we developed this strategy with the next generation of clinical trials and higher expectations from regulators. We need to be aggressive in adopting automation for TMF document management so that we can improve our quality, efficiency, and inspection readiness while improving the user experience. So with this strategy, we began a multi-year journey, and I've actually presented on that journey in other conferences, but that journey involved multiple areas to improve the eTMF system, but also to improve our processes. We talk about this journey, though, we really are focused on quality because it's the quality and the improvement in quality that we're always looking to achieve. Like all of you, we measure quality probably in the same way. So completeness, timeliness, and document quality. TMF completeness, I believe everyone probably measures this the same way. At Pfizer, we look at the number of fulfilled placeholders versus the total number of placeholders expected to be fulfilled at a point in time. Now, one thing to note about our system is that we have very specific placeholders for specific documents. So we have a placeholder for the protocol, of course, and we have a placeholder for the clinical study report. We have placeholders for informed consent documents and for the IRB IEC interactions. So every placeholder is a specific marker for an intended document. Of course, with those placeholders, we need to know when they're due. So due dates are calculated primarily using milestones, but sometimes we have due dates based on events. In addition to TMF completeness, we measure timeliness. Now, there are different ways, of course, that people measure timeliness. What we've chosen to do right now at Pfizer is measure the number of documents that are activated within 35 calendar days of receipt or finalization. And what this means is really we're looking at the receipt date and we're saying, okay, based on that receipt date, is 35 days or less the passed to ensure that we're getting these documents contemporaneously. This is a little tricky because receipt date can be hard to determine depending on who the document submitter is. We provide a lot of guidance on what receipt date is to ensure that we're measuring the receipt date against the document date correctly. Finally, TMF document quality. This is simply the measure of documents, the number of documents that pass through QC on first submission. One thing to note about our practice at Pfizer versus some other companies is we do measure, or we do QC 100% of our documents at this point. That's not to say that we are not interested in a risk-based approach to TMF document quality, but we implemented what we call a central filing practice where our team of document specialists actually indexes the documents and then QCs them. So this really relieves a lot of the heavy lifting on the document submitters and study team members who are providing documents to the TMF. They only need to complete very few attributes, and then it's handed off to my team, and that team then completes the indexing and does the QC. So that is why we are currently doing 100% QC of all of our documents coming in. But back to completeness. So we really do think of completeness as that primary measure for understanding the quality of the TMF as a whole. So the quality of the study TMF. But this is a challenge, and you see these little thought bubbles here that talk about why we have a challenge for completeness. We may have a strong process with defined requirements and a top-notch system, but we still have missing documents. We may set thresholds for how to measure completeness, and those thresholds may say, oh, you have to have a 98% completeness in order to be green. But if you have tens of thousands of documents, you can still have a large number of missing documents and be green. Additionally, even though we have what we consider to be a very complete, 100% compliant TMF, an inspector may find discrepancies. So what we note here is that TMF completeness is really only an indicator of whether the TMF contains all expected documents. It doesn't account for missing placeholders for new document versions or event-driven documents or ad hoc documents. And we really do rely on quality reviews to help us to identify missing or excess placeholders. The quality foundations that we have established here are optimized processes with system integrations and automation. But what you don't see here is at the foundation, it really is about the people. It's about the study team members, it's about the document specialists, it's about the TMF owners, and it's about really your whole organization's attention to ensuring that the TMF is complete and of high quality. But despite the people, or with the people, I should say, we really do need to keep looking at our processes, paying attention to system integrations and optimizing those, and then automating where possible. In the optimized processes area, I mentioned before that we have a central filing practice. We implemented that a few years ago, and it has really helped with ensuring the quality of the documents coming into the TMF. We also have wizard-based study TMF creation, and that wizard is used, it's a series of questions that the TMF owner responds to in collaboration with the study team to create all of the placeholders for a study, and that's the study-specific document list. We also have event management, and with event management, this process really ensures that when an event occurs, like a protocol amendment, we have an event that is run that prompts the TMF owner to consider what additional placeholders are needed for that event. And finally, I'll be talking about the TMF study owner transformation. This is an activity that we've been pursuing for the past year to improve our overall process and management of TMF studies. But before I get to that, I did want to share system integrations. So one area that we feel is really important, especially for timeliness and completeness, is auto-filing from source systems. And I'm guessing that many of you have this in place as well. So we are getting documents coming in from different systems, from our CTMS, from our training system, from the ECRF system. So all of those documents are filing automatically into our TMF. This is a huge help in ensuring that we get the documents that we expect. And if those documents are QC'd upstream, then we can avoid that QC as they're coming in. We also get data fields for milestones, for sites and data feeds, for milestones, sites, and investigators. So for example, all of the milestones that we have in the system are coming from our upstream CTMS or another source. Also, as new sites or investigators are added, automated placeholders will be created for those investigators, or SSDL will be created for that site. Finally, in the automation area, I mentioned already our study-specific document list. Some of those document lists are automated. For example, a country and site document list will be automated based on a trigger or a feed that we receive when a new site is added. We also have relationships and versions for documents. So if we have one type of document that is related to another type of document, we set that connection in the system. Quality reviews we'll be talking about later, but also automated placeholder creation. So we do have a means to automatically create placeholders as documents come through if those document types do not need assessment by the TMF owner. I do want to talk about the study owner transformation because this has been a really important effort that is working collectively with the automation efforts to ensure that we are gaining the efficiencies that we expect as well as the improvements in quality. So we have adjusted the TMF study owner role. We've simplified our quality review practices, and we're collaborating with other study team members or study team groups to ensure that we have a balance and clear roles and responsibilities. So as we've adjusted the TMF study owner or the TMF owner model, we took a look across all of the different teams that we have performing this work. And at Pfizer, we had several different groups acting as TMF owners. Typically, those groups had responsibilities for certain types of documents. We had taken a phase approach. So we had one group looking at phase 1 documents, another group phase 2, 3. We might have another group focused on a particular region or geography. So as we assessed that model, we wanted to know if we make changes here, do we get a more optimized workforce? So one of the first things that we started to look at is, can we introduce another type of role? We were calling this the study owner associate role to help manage quality reviews. That role was introduced last year, and it's been extremely effective because it can absorb a lot of the work that the TMF owner may have, and if they're juggling multiple studies, they may not be completing some of the quality reviews on time. So with this group of resources coming in, they take a look at the quality reviews that need to be performed. They also may specialize in certain areas, so they can become expert in one area and they are better able to assess whether or not there's an issue with, let's say, informed consent documents. So that has been very effective. The other area that I'll go into more detail about later is the collaboration with the CSTAs. We have the clinical study team associates at Pfizer. I think that would be analogous to CTAs in most companies, who perform a lot of work in the TMF. So we wanted to take advantage of that and ensure that we were collaborating and not duplicating any work. The other areas we wanted to begin to deepen our expertise. So do we get advantages if we're focusing on specific therapy and disease areas? For example, if we have study owners who are focused on vaccines, or study owners who are focused on maybe inflammation or immunology, are they better equipped to manage their studies? Do they have a better understanding that helps them to work with the study teams? And the answer is yes, they do, and we're finding that to be quite successful as well. Finally, expanding scope. So with the adjustment of resources and the automation, we're finding that a single TMF owner can manage more studies, and that helps us with the overall resource management. So I mentioned earlier about quality review check simplification, and this is part of the study owner transformation, but it also feeds into automation. At Pfizer, our practice has been to have dual approaches to quality reviews. We actually have what we call content reviews, and those are reviews that are performed by the functional lines. And then we also have quality reviews. Those are the reviews that are performed by the TMF owners. Collectively, the number of checks that are outlined for both the content and the quality reviews was over 600. So we had many checks that are being performed. So that's prior to optimization, 600 checks. Some of those checks are repeated at various intervals. Some of those checks may only be run one time. So we had a team take a look at all of those checks, and after optimization, they were able to reduce those checks to about half, 330 checks remaining out of the 600. The way that they could do this is by removing duplicate checks, taking advantage of what was happening upstream. So if we get a feed in from some source upstream, we may not need to perform a check. So you can see here that all of these 600 checks are manual at the point prior to optimization. Only 50 manual checks after optimization. 220 are partially automated and 60 are fully automated. If we combine and align those checks, we get them down to 125. Now, this simplification doesn't mean that we're not performing checks. We're actually improving the quality through this process because we can focus on what matters most. And of course, we take advantage of automation. Finally, I did want to highlight a few more details about the alignment that we have with our CSTAs. As I mentioned earlier, both the TMF operations team and the CDNO, and I realized when I was reviewing these slides that I have a lot of acronyms here. So CDNO is Clinical Development and Operations. That's a Pfizer group. And TMF Operations is my team. So both of our teams are providing operational support for study TMFs, and there has been some overlap in those activities. So we convened a limited duration team to align the two roles and ensure that we had reduced duplication of responsibilities. And the result was a new model with an updated RACI and a quick reference guide to help with performance metrics. Again, all of this is driving toward a higher quality TMF. So we focus our attention on specific areas. Specific groups are looking at specific aspects of the TMF to ensure we have the best quality. And this is just a snapshot of the RACI and the quick reference guide that we developed. For those of you who are not familiar, RACI is responsible, accountable, contributes, and then informed. So that's what we're using as RACI. And I believe you'll have access to these slides so you can see some of these abbreviations as well. Okay, so that is really what I wanted to share with you about our TMF study owner transformation. And now we'll talk about the quality review. So just to remind you again, we have optimized processes with system integrations and automation. All of these are really our quality foundations, and they're all working together. But the quality review area is really one where we have seen tremendous improvement, and I'm really excited about the changes that have been made. So as we began to develop our strategy around quality review, we really wanted to develop some principles. And you can see here, one-stop shop is one of the key principles. And what we mean by this is that we have one place to both see what needs to be done, to report findings and then also to record the resolutions. So one-stop shop. The automation of the quality reviews was initially thought to be the primary area where we would focus. But as we began to develop the requirements for the quality reviews, we realized that we really needed a workflow or business process management to help us ensure that everything was done as expected. So the review principles and the one-stop shop are that the quality reviews are all conducted in the eTMF. So we're no longer generating a spreadsheet and taking that spreadsheet and comparing it to what's in the system and in the spreadsheet manually recording reviews. The other quality principle is that every study will have a study-specific quality review plan that outlines the checks to be performed. And this is very much like our SSDL, our study-specific document list. So in our eTMF, every study has that study-specific document list, which is all of the placeholders we expect for that study. Similarly, the SSQRP, the study-specific quality review plan, is the same. It is all of those checks that need to be run for that specific study. Quality check tasks are assigned to the designated check performer at specified milestones. So as we set up the SSQRP, associated to each check are the milestones at which that check may be run. The next principle is that checks are automated where possible, and I'll share with you the automation patterns that we have. Finally, every quality check task records the findings and the resolutions. And this is very important because this allows us to report out and develop KPIs and begin to focus on those areas where we see the most findings. In a manual process, we really can't assess key performance indicators. We just don't have the data to support that. So now, with all of this workflow and everything being embedded in the system, we can begin to see where we have issues, maybe where we don't have issues, and hone our quality review focus. So the study-specific quality review plan guidance is that throughout the study, TMF quality reviewers are responsible for ensuring all required TMF documents for the study are available in the eTMF system at the time they are expected. And this is key to any TMF or eTMF. Whether you have a paper TMF or whether you have eTMF, you really do need to continue to check all throughout the study whether you have the documents that you should at the time that they are expected. For us, this includes ensuring that we have all versions of documents and that we don't have duplicates. The purpose of our review is to confirm that the documentation necessary to reconstruct the study has been filed in the eTMF system. So very basic. There's nothing fancy about this. It's, everything that all of you are doing as well. In order for us to develop a system to deliver this type of quality review automation, we had to develop user stories. And I'm sharing these user stories with you because I think if you're going to develop something similar, this would be very helpful for you. So as the TMF director, I want to be able to assess the reviews that have been conducted so that I can monitor completeness and the overall TMF health. Similarly, as an operations lead, I want to be able to monitor content and quality review checks so that I can flag issues. And if I'm an SO lead, I want to monitor content and quality reviews so I can monitor the performance of my team. And finally, as a TMF study owner or TMF owner, I want a single place to manage and track quality reviews so I know what tasks should be performed for my studies at any point in time. The types of quality checks that we have are automated checks, partially automated, and manual. And you obviously know what manual checks are, so I'm going to highlight what the automated and partially automated checks are. And automated checks are truly automated, but we're not using AI. There's no artificial intelligence. This is all rule-based checking. We have check conditions that are configured in the system, and those checks are run at specified intervals. The check will either pass or fail, and failed checks then become a task for somebody to resolve. And I have an example check here. I won't read through these because I think I'm getting over time, but you can take a look at these later. Partially automated checks are really conditions that are configured as a query. So we can't automate the full check, but we can have a saved search or a saved query that would be run. And then the results of that are presented as a task for further action. And finally, manual checks are simply those checks. They're still outlined in the system, but they have to be performed manually. We have 5 automation patterns for the quality checks. Again, I won't go into the details of these because it gets a little bit complicated, but you'll see here that we have checks for different document types, cross checks, and this is basically a count of placeholders. We have relationship checks, so if I have a protocol amendment, I may need to have several other documents that accompany that, so those documents are related. We have checks to identify potential duplicates, and then also checks for empty or satisfied ad hoc placeholders, because that is just a condition in our system that shouldn't occur. So these are the automation patterns that are in place. We hope to get more as the system matures. And finally, before we go into the Q&A, I did just want to give you a high-level flow of our quality review process. And I think based on the discussion, this will seem logical. So we have the configuration part. We configure that SSQRP. It is based off a master quality review specification that also exists in the system. We activate the SSQRP just like we activate a study-specific document list, and that's when the tasks begin to trigger. And those tasks are assigned to individuals. Those individuals execute the tasks, either manual, partially automated, or automated. The tasks and the quality checks are resolved. And finally, we monitor and report. So we assess quality review performance. We actually measure completeness and timeliness of the quality reviews and adjust checks based on past results. So this is where a risk-based approach comes in. So with that, I think we move into Q&A. And I think, Oliver, I should stop sharing?
Yes, please, if you wouldn't mind. And then I will be sharing my screen again. Thank you so much for that, Mary. That was such an insightful presentation. There's been a few questions that have come in. I myself have a few questions for you. I'm going to.
I think yours, Oliver, 600.
Okay, perfect. So everyone can see my screen. Let's jump into the Q&A. One of the first questions I had for you was right back at the beginning of your presentation. You were talking about sort of those 3 core pillars of TMF quality, right? Like completeness, timeliness, and quality. And timeliness is sort of one of those like it's probably the one that has the most variability from organization to organization. And you talked specifically about having a 35-day from receipt or activation. Mm-hmm. And I've seen some organizations that are still maturing their TMF process go with a slightly longer timeline. Some are more ambitious and shorter timeline. what was it that you guys put your finger on 35 days? I've seen others do 30 days. Is there anything that's driving that, or is that just what you found is achievable based on your process today?
It's really the latter. Well, it's not even about achievable, because I would say that timeliness is one of the areas that we continue to work on getting most of the studies at green. We have a 95% threshold for timeliness. And that is, achieving that is tough for many studies, but the receipt to activation measure. So I think there's two aspects of timeliness. There's why are we using receipt to activation, and then why 35 days. And I think 35 days basically kind of industry standard when you look at some of the what's published, both with the TMF reference model or with formerly MCC. You can see that 35 days is, a general target. What we have found, though, is that measure alone may not be enough, and we're looking to introduce additional measures. So document date to receipt date, document date to activation date. We have the data, so now we just really need to start to use it to assess trends.
Okay. And would you have typically like you might have a different date or a different benchmark that you're trying to hit for the receipt versus activation, or are you guys still trying to work that out?
Well, so from receipt to activation, I think we're sticking with 35 days, but we're going to begin to assess what's the document date to receipt date span, because we do expect there are some documents that we expect the document date and the receipt date match, right? Those internally generated documents, we shouldn't see a lag. But for other documents, you might expect a lag. So that's what we're trying to see, is how much more precise can we be as we have more data.
Okay, perfect. I have a bunch of other questions, but I'm going to throw it to the audience here. So there's a question here around quality TMF review. Are there any other additional tools that you utilize to support quality TMF review outside of maybe some of the high level items that you mentioned?
That's a great question. And so we do use we have additional practices, but I wouldn't call them tools. So we have a number of guides that we have in place to help us assess quality, but they're not embedded in the system at this time. So for example, we might have a quick reference guide around vendor documentation management, and that quick reference guide outlines a variety of different steps that we might perform to help us assess vendor documentation. Some of that could be considered a manual quality review, but it's an additional guide. So I would say we do have practices like that, but not automated tools.
Okay. That leads me on to another question that was asked here by Yolanda, which is talking about the sort of, I guess, the volume of manual versus automated checks, right? And in one of your slides, you mentioned that there were sort of fully automated, partially automated, and manual checks. Yeah. In terms of the total number of checks quality checks that are happening, what's the sort of percentage of manual versus automated versus partially automated, if you have that number to hand?
Yeah, so I think if we look at post-optimization without combining our checks, we have the number of manual and the number of automated are about the same, so 50 to 60. But the partially automated is where the bulk of those are, and partial automation is kind of manual, I would say. So what we've done is we've configured the query that will return the results to perform the check. So the results in front of the TMF owner or the functional line, and all they need to do really is take a look at what is on the screen to determine if they have any findings.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. We're going to switch now to talk a little bit about placeholders. So Anastasia asked a question: how are you defining the initial number of placeholders, and who is defining the placeholders on a study-by-study basis? Is it the clinical project team, or is it another group that's deciding on that base level of placeholders?
So that is a great question. And I think I need to just back up a little bit to outline how, because we don't really talk about number of placeholders. It's not about the numbers for us. We have what we call our master document list, which is all of those possible placeholders that would be expected for a study. And then, as I mentioned, we have a wizard, and that wizard guides the TMF owner with the study team through a series of questions to help refine the placeholders that might be expected for that specific study. So at the end of that process, we come up with that study-specific document list, which are very specific placeholders for every document. So it's not really numbers, it's what do we expect at a discrete level to have at the point that the study is starting.
And that's decided by that TMF study owner that you were referencing before?
Well, it's a combination of things. So we have rules that are in place that would automatically require certain documents. So we have the notion of a core document. Those core documents are going to be expected for the study based on the responses. And then we have what we call assessed documents, and those document types are assessed because they may or may not be needed based on the specific elements of the protocol or the study design.
Okay, perfect. Let's see if we have time for one or two more. Question here from Sylvia. How do you usually monitor or track the receipt of documents from the study teams? Are transmittal sheets in place? And I guess I'll add on the end of that, or is this being done by your TMF system?
It's being done by our TMF system. So depending on the group that's submitting documents, there may be a process in place in front of the submission to the TMF. So for example, some of our CROs might have a document management team that's reviewing the documents before they submit them to our TMF. But typically, we just have a streamlined process. When the document's ready, it should be submitted.
Okay, perfect. Question came in here talking more about that TMF study owner role that you mentioned. And I think you mentioned in your presentation that there was sort of you identified through some optimization that there was a larger number of studies that a TMF study owner could now manage. Today, how many studies is that on average?
Well, it really depends on the phase of the study or other aspects of the design. So, you know, some TMF study owners might be managing 6 to 8 studies. Others may only be managing 4 to 5. So it really depends. And we look at a number of different factors, and we have a resourcing algorithm that helps us to determine how much a TMF study owner can manage. So number of countries, number of sites, all of that factors into how many studies can be managed.
Okay, I have one final question from myself. So you've obviously talking about this sort of next generation TMF process that the team has been building now over a number of years. It seems like you guys have, I think, achieved a lot of what many organizations today will be listening and thinking, oh my goodness, I wish if my team could achieve this would be amazing. Obviously, with the resources that you have, what's next for the Pfizer TMF team? What are you guys thinking about looking at from a future perspective when it comes to what you want to do next in the context of TMF?
Great question. So there's so many things, but I think, if I were to say in one word, I would say simplify. We are really looking to continue to simplify how we're managing our TMF, and through that simplification, hopefully make it easier for study teams to interact and understand what they need to do. So, it's a very, all of TMF is very complex. There's all sorts of rules or questions about, should I file this? When should I file this? How do I file it, right? We want to simplify that as much as possible so that we can more easily and efficiently manage these TMFs and take the burden off of the study teams and reduce confusion.
Okay, love that. Just to wrap things up for today, first of all, I want to thank you, Mary, for joining us. Not only for joining us for today's session, but also kicking off the conference. So super happy to have you here, and thanks for speaking and preparing such an insightful presentation, and for answering some really great questions. I want to thank everybody that turned up today and joined the session. There were lots and lots of really great questions, lots of folks joining from lots of different areas in the chat, so that's perfect. I want to just move our attention on now to what's happening next. So right after this session, once this session ends, head to the lounge. There's a couple of networking tables that you guys can virtually sit at. I will be there, maybe Mary will be there, I don't know, to answer any more questions that you may have about her presentation. But head there. We've got about a 15-minute networking break. It's a great way to meet other people from all around the world working in TMF. Right after the networking break, we have another session. The session is titled The Vendor Selection Blueprint, Getting the Right eTMF Vendor and eTMF System In-House. It's going to be starting at around 10 a.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Central European Time, and we're joined by Kate Santoro, Director of TMF Operations at Intellia Therapeutics. So with that, I'll close today's session. I want to thank everybody again for attending, and of course, Mary, thank you for attending.
Thank you.
And we'll see you on the next session. Thanks, guys.